another conversation. And today I have with me a wonderful guest. His name is Chip Conley, and he is the founder of the Modern Elder Academy and the author of the New York Times bestseller, Wisdom at Work. I'm sure you'll find this conversation an uplifting discussion. I look forward to your comments. In an era that prizes digital intelligence, Chip believes the need for wisdom, emotional intelligence, and the ability to collaborate and coach is greater than ever. The Modern Elder Academy is the first school of its kind, created to help people in midlife to repurpose their knowledge and embrace their mastery, value, and the roles of wisdom keeper and seeker. The programs are based on founder Chip Conley's book, Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder, and are designed to encourage a mind shift toward greater relevance and empower midlifers to consider what's next on their career roadmap. Graduates even earn a certificate in mindset management and are given tools to dramatically reduce stress and ramp up resiliency and adaptability, leaving the campus renewed and ready to travel to their next destination. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Tell us, your background was hospitality, and I'm reading that you actually disrupted your industry, 3 or 4 times throughout your career process?
Well, 3 times, really. First of all, back in the mid-1980s, when I was in my mid-20s, I decided to become a boutique hotelier. And I was a commercial real estate developer, a young one at age 25. And because boutique hotels were just getting off the ground, and Australia has boutique hotels. But back in the mid-1980s, not a whole lot of places had them other than Europe, let's say. And so I started a company called Joie de Vivre, means joy of life in French. And it grew into the second largest boutique hotel company in the United States. Sold it after 24 years at the bottom of the Great Recession. It's a Hyatt brand now called JDV. And then a couple of years after I sold it, the 3 young founders of Airbnb, which I know Australians know very well, they came along as a small startup and said, we want you to be our mentor to help us to grow into an international brand of a hospitality brand. So I didn't know what to say because I didn't know the tech industry at all. And they were basically a tech company. And I joined them and we disrupted the hospitality industry in a big way. Airbnb is now the most valuable hospitality company in the world. So I spent 7.5 years with them, 4 years full-time, 3.5 years as a strategic advisor. And I guess my last disruption has been the most recent one, which is to create the world's first midlife wisdom school and a series of regenerative communities, not retirement communities, but regenerative communities where people learn how to regenerate themselves in midlife and beyond in a community where they live together. The school is separate from that. The school is people come for a week at a time. Australians come a lot, and they come for a week to Baja, California, which is a part of Mexico. But the people who really fall in love with it all then say, oh, wow, I love this MEA thing, this Modern Elder Academy thing. And so I don't want to just go to a workshop. I actually want to live in a community full of people who have a similar ethos about how to reframe aging.
Oh my goodness. So let's unpack that a little bit. So what came first and where did the idea come from? Was it the school, the academy? Is that where?
Yeah. So what happened was, Kathie, when I was at Airbnb, they started calling me the Modern Elder, and I wasn't very happy with that. I'm not elderly, and they said, "Oh no, you're not modern elderly. You're modern elder." And I said, "Well, what's the difference?" Modern elder is as curious as they are wise. That's what they told me. It's like, okay, if I'm as curious as I am wise, I like that. If that's what a modern elder is, I will be that. And so what I learned in that time was like, wow, in the workplace, we could use some more modern elders, especially for some of these young tech companies. And that's when I finished my full-time work there. I started writing this book, Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder. And in writing that book, I had this idea for a midlife wisdom school, the Modern Elder Academy. And so that's what came first. Because I started thinking about how many friends I have who've really struggled through midlife in their mid 40s or their early 50s, or sometimes in their early 60s. It's a period of time where sometimes people struggle. The good news is there's social science research shows that the U curve of happiness, people tend to bottom out in their happiness around 45 to 50, and then it starts getting better for them. But a lot of people don't know that. At 45, you're like, oh, this is terrible.
That's right.
So I wanted to create a place that could provide a school and some tools and a rites of passage and rituals and a spiritual basis to it all that helps people to understand that what's happening in midlife is the primary operating system has been your ego up to that point. And it is around midlife that your primary operating system shifts to your soul. Now, your mileage may vary. For a lot of people, they may say, I'm soulful in my 20s, and that may be true. And there's people in their 70s who haven't gotten there yet. But there is an operating system change at some point in your life when the individualization that we learn in our teen years and our young years to be individualized moves from learning how to individuate to becoming a little bit too obsessed with your ego. And it is around midlife when most people actually have a shift and there's a stirring inside of them that is often a curiosity about meaning, purpose, and spirituality.
So how did you develop the program? I mean, where did you start? I mean, it's really radical thinking. For example, at the moment, it is International Decade for Healthy Aging. Did you know that?
From the United Nations, yes.
Yeah, and I haven't seen a thing like what you're doing. I mean, they're trying to repurpose aging, but there is nothing that's saying you've still got a long way to go on this journey of life. Don't stop.
I want you to tell the United Nations that, because they're I love them, and they're learning. I think they're learning how do we dust off the idea of aging such that it is not a death sentence. Yes, at some point you will die, but we're aging every time from the time we actually come out of the womb. I mean, we age. That's what we do as humans. At some point, what we tend to do as humans is we tend to think of, oh, he's growing or she's growing. Oh, look at all that growth. And at some point we move from growing to aging. You don't say it like a 14-year-old, oh, he's aged so much. No, you've grown so much.
He's grown, true. Yeah.
But as we look later in life, we somehow think like, oh, that person's aged so much. So the interesting thing about it is, yes, physically, our age shows up. Just as we get comfortable in our own skin, it starts to sag. So it's very obvious that how we look is a function. We are in a culture that's very looks driven, but there are a lot of things that actually get better with age. And what grows with age? Well, our emotional intelligence grows with age. Our ability to think holistically and systemically, what's called crystallized intelligence, actually grows with age. Our spiritual curiosity and our desire to actually be in service of the world, that grows with age. So I'm from California originally, and California has a lot of old growth forests. An old growth forest is a place where the tall trees are creating a canopy for all the trees below it. And we have no problem including old and growth in the same sentence when we talk about redwood trees. But when we talk about old and growth, when we talk about humans, we don't usually put them in the same sentence because we think somehow at some point you move from growing to aging.
So getting back to the question about how did you develop the program, did you have to bring in academics to help you, plot a journey or?
Yeah, so we have academics from London School of Business, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, UC Berkeley, all kinds of places helping us with the 5 key pillars of our program. Number 1 is, what is wisdom and how do we learn to cultivate and harvest it in our lifetime? Number 2 is, how do we reframe our relationship with aging? Number 3 is, how do we create a growth mindset in our life? You can either have a fixed or a growth mindset. How do you create more of a growth mindset? Number 4 is, how do we navigate midlife transitions? Because gosh, in midlife, you're going through so many transitions. We tend to think of people going through transitions when they're young in life, but we're going through lots of transitions in midlife as well. And then the fifth pillar is regeneration. How do we regenerate the planet, our purpose, our sense of wellness, in so many different ways? Because regeneration is a much better concept than retirement. So, and I'm not saying people shouldn't retire. You can retire if you want, but if you're not constantly regenerating, even in retirement, then you truly are in the process of dying. You're not just aging, you're dying. And, you know, regeneration is something you can do as a retired person as well.
So the thing I noticed just looking at your website is how much fun it looks. So you talk, and every time I see something on you on social media, you're having a ball. So they sound very serious pillars of education. How do you translate that to so much fun?
Oh, what a great question, Kathie. I wish one of my co-founders, Christine, was here with me right now, because Christine is our playful chief experience officer. Well, here's one thing: is when we tend to be serious. First of all, when it comes to educating people in midlife, it can't just be book studies, and it can't just be online. We do online programs at MEA, but they're done in a very different way. It needs to be done in a way that actually amplifies curiosity. That is not about just accumulating knowledge, but it's learning how to ask good questions. It's most importantly, learning how to become a beginner again. So at the start of your week at MEA, you learn how to bake bread with 3 other people in your cohort, and you're going to present your bread to everybody else. Well, like, what does that have to do with wisdom? Well, it has a lot to do with collaboration. It has a lot to do with learning a new skill. By the end of the week, 2/3 of our people in a workshop actually try to learn how to surf with a surfing instructor. You don't have to, it's not a requirement. And at the start of the week, maybe 1 out of 10 people would do it. We have about 20 people in a workshop. But by the end of the week, like, I'm gonna try this. So learning how to become a beginner again and learning to laugh at oneself. There's a beautiful TED talk about a woman who's learned 8 languages. And her biggest piece of advice in the TED Talk is, if you want to learn a language or if you want to learn anything, learn to have fun. Because if you're not having fun, you're probably either being too hard on yourself, too critical, or you're getting too focused on being performative. You're trying to be perfect as well. And so one of the key things for our week together is, how do we help people become vulnerable and laugh at themselves, laugh with each other, and learn how to learn together. And it's a transformative experience, because it actually shifts how they can look at themselves when they go back home. So we're not just filling people with facts in their head, but we're actually helping them to understand new habits. Oops. Unknown caller. Turn that off. Sorry. I'm turning it off.
So that brings me to where you're located. I mean, you've got a campus in Mexico. Why Mexico? I mean, you own the campus. It's like a hotel, or?
No, it's not a hotel. It's like a luxury small resort or retreat. It's about 5 acres on the beach. We started there partly because I had a home on the beach there, and I was like, okay, I was writing my book there, and I said, what if I created a campus all around here? That's how it happened. But we also have 2 campuses that we're in the process of creating in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the United States. So New Mexico's in the United States, and Mexico is obviously another country. But we started in Mexico partly because it was right in my backyard for my second home. But what we learned over time that was actually quite important was that if you did this in someone's backyard, if you did this in the Blue Mountains in Sydney and said, come to the Blue Mountains and spend a week with us in the process of going through this transformative learning program. For many people, if they can drive there and it's easy to get there, and 24 hours into the workshop, they're like, oh, this is intense. They might just get in their car and go home. Secondly, if you're doing it in a place where it's commuters, where people are all driving in, it's less diverse. It's not people from all over. We've had people from 40 countries come to our campus. And what we know more than anything else is, if you show up at the website, if you show up at the workshop thinking of your identity that you've always had as being stuck to you because you're doing it close to home, you're not helping you become liminal. To be liminal is to be in between two states. And it's learning how to be liminal and be comfortable with it, and then how to be a beginner and operate from that. So the fact that, yes, it was in my own backyard for my second home, and that's how we started, has turned out to be very successful. Now, it was terrible during COVID because nobody was traveling internationally. But, the good news is we seem to be on the other side of that.
What an extraordinary concept. So that's how you've evolved into regenerative communities, that people have actually said they want to stay around that space.
That's exactly right, Kathie. What happened was first of all, we did beta test of this idea of the Midlife Wisdom School Modern Elder Academy for 6 months, 13 different workshops. And the number one thing people asked for was, oh, where's your alumni program? That was a good sign. So their feedback was like, hey, we like this. We want to be part of an alumni association. Secondly, we started doing workshops for a couple of years. And what people said is like, I liked that my week at MEA, but I'd like to live like this year round. How could I do that? And that's what led us to creating the regenerative communities, which are residential communities built often around a regenerative farm or ranch. And that's, how the regenerative communities started. And we hope that regenerative communities will replace retirement communities in the future.
I was just about to ask that question, and I've done a lot of work in aged care. So it's another way of looking at retirement villages. These are communities where people can do all sorts of fun things, but it's got a different ethos around getting older.
Getting older, and if people choose to. A lot of people live in communities that don't know their next door neighbors. And wouldn't it be interesting if you knew your neighbors and you had a potluck once a week for anybody who wanted to be in the community at the potluck? You might have meditation sessions in the morning for people who actually want to just show up and meditate together. It would be really interesting if you lived in a place where there was a common ethos that actually brought people together without it becoming a cult or a commune.
True. So have you got one up and running yet, or is it still in the early days?
Our first one in Mexico, in Baja, is about 60% complete. It's full in terms of everybody's sold out. 26 alumni bought homes there straight out. And now I'm here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, working on our next regenerative community here, which is going to be 125 to 150 homes.
So you've used your entire career to find a way of repurposing life. Really, that's what you've done. Yeah. Like the hospitality industry, the property development, a global organization like Airbnb has all come together with this one foundation. That's extraordinary.
Yeah, when I look back, if you can find the through line of your life, how did you, they say hindsight is 20/20, and it's true. But if you can find the through line of your life, it can really help you to understand how to filter and edit where you should spend your time. And today I feel very lucky that I am doing the thing that I feel like I was put on this earth to do. It feels like my calling.
Well, that's pretty obvious with what you've achieved. How long have you been going?
5 years.
5 years, and you've achieved all of that. That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
So where to next? What's next on the agenda?
Well, these large campuses in Santa Fe, New Mexico will be a big deal. They'll be a game changer, partly because our largest market of people who come to MEA are Americans, are people from the United States. So we do about 33 workshops a year currently. And by the year 2025, with these 2 new campuses opening, we will be doing 300 workshops a year. So yes, a lot of our focus right now is how do we build the infrastructure for that kind of growth.
So as we come to the end of our discussion, I ask people 2 questions always, and they are, how do you self-care? How do you look after yourself? Now, listening to you, I'm sure it's part of your day-to-day practice, living in a fun environment. And then the other question is, what does spirituality mean to you, recognizing that everything you're doing now at the moment is about meaning and purpose?
So for me, self-care is meditating in the morning, for sure, and really doing something I call spying on the divine. So 3 days a week for 3 hours each time, so 9 hours a week, I go for a walk with my dog to a new area that I am not familiar with. In Mexico, I live in an area that's full of nature. And so I go for these walks with the idea of just observing, becoming a first-class noticer of nature, because I think nature has a lot to teach us. Mm. So that's part of my self-care. And I think that's a nice bridge to my sense of spirituality. I think, excuse me, spirituality to me is about how do you see the wholeness and the oneness of the world and how it's all interconnected and it's not attached to your ego. And so spirituality speaks to the idea of that interconnectedness. And maybe your role or my role in creating a world that allows us to feel more connected, not just to each other, but to all sentient beings and to that tree and, and to basically everything in life. And so that to me is what spirituality is about, is how does spirituality help connect you to the world overall and show how small you are and yet how important you are at the same time.
Thanks for joining us, Chip.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored.